honest with my viewers. This is something that is escalating, or it appears to be escalating. If you would please watch towards the seriousness, the gravity of all this. Thank you.
We have continued to see activity that leads us to believe that there's escalation that may be taking place. And so we're taking all the appropriate actions, both from a security perspective and well as our ability to make sure that the president has a wide range of options in the event that something should actually take place.
The Trump administration is revealing more about why it is sending the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group and an unnamed bomber task force to U.S. Central Command in the Middle East and the potential for war. Yesterday, Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan tweeted that the deployment is in response to, quote, indications of a credible threat by Iranian regime forces. New intelligence also shows that Iran and its proxies are moving forces and may be planning for both land and sea attacks, according to U.S. officials and a defense official. After the U.S. designated the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization last month, Tehran responded by designating all U.S. troops in the Middle East as terrorists and the U.S. as a sponsor of terrorism. Joining us now, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, retired four-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. He is Chief International Security and Diplomacy Analyst for NBC News and MSNBC.
Admiral, there have been reports over the past couple. By the way, I am your acting morning news host. Everybody's acting around here. There were news reports for the past few days that this military exercise had been planned for some time. What can you tell us?
It was planned for the carrier strike group to move into the Arabian Gulf, but not for a few months. And as you know, Joe, we've had carrier strike group in the Gulf for decades. I commanded the Enterprise carrier strike group some years ago. These are massive machines of war. They carry 70 combat aircraft. They come with cruisers, missiles. Right. But it's pretty common to have one in there. What is different is coupling this speed-up deployment with the rhetoric. It is a significant escalation in that sense. We ought to be concerned about rising tension in the Arabian Gulf.
So, Admiral, do you see it as a credible threat that the Iranians would attack any U.S. forces?
I think it's very unlikely that there would be an overt attack against U.S. forces. Possibility of a terrorist strike, something under the radar, that's a possibility. Overt, very, very unlikely.
Yeah, and so does this seem to you most likely, although I understand as a military man or woman, you always have to prepare for the worst. Does this seem to you, on the surface at least, at first glance, to be more about Donald Trump just saber-rattling, playing to his political base at home instead of actually doing anything that's going to have long...
I want to stop right there to my viewers. These people here, as far as I'm concerned, they are a cancer in the American democracy, this talk show host, because they're steadily ridiculing and criticizing the Donald Trump administration. I heard them bend over backwards towards saying that all that stuff going on the southern border was just a bunch of bull and that it was all manufactured by Donald Trump. But yet now, whenever I watch other reports and see other reports, the events that's occurring down on the southern border is not fictitious, to say the least. And these type of people that people listen to is just appalling to me, that they stay on the TV network. And I realize they only have a certain base, maybe 30 million, maybe 40 million. I don't know what their base is. But during the time of that base, they are steadily bombarding negative, treasoning thoughts into other people's minds towards defying our chief and commander. And as far as I am concerned, people like that should be ushered off the airwaves and never be allowed to speak on a national airwave system again. As far as the ordeal going on with the carriers, that actually goes beyond anything that Donald Trump is in control of, in one sense, because we have a government that actually has several governments inside this government. And the government of the Pentagon exceeds and excels all other entities that we have in the United States. And this move was just not made by one man towards going to bring these carriers, incidentally, over to that area. There's something brewing. There's something cooking. And that's the reason why the Pentagon, the CIA, is now stepping in towards doing what it needs to do to protect the American people's interest. These people that's on TV right here that has steadily slandered our president needs to be taken off the airwaves immediately. Please listen.
Long-term military consequences.
I would say every military deployment where you see a president reach for those aircraft carriers, there's always going to be a domestic component to it, Joe. I think in this particular case, when you look at the back and forth of us declaring the Iranian Revolutionary Guard terrorists, them declaring us terrorists, I think it's actually a prudent military move to accelerate that carrier deployment into the Gulf. But is there a domestic component? There always is.
So, Admiral, if you could continue to help us with our suspicion level here. The reports are that this move was made, the heightening up the accelerated pace of the carrier group. This move was made after new intelligence was received in Washington. Apparently, the intelligence came from Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency. The benefits would accrue to Saudi Arabia and Israel if we inject ourselves further in that situation in the Middle East. The National Security Advisor for the President, John Bolton, had a thundering response to this intelligence. So help calm this thing down for us, would you please? Because I think more than a few people are looking at this and saying,
Indeed. It certainly can get into your head, but let's look at the geopolitics of this for a second. If you see Iran, which it is, pushing throughout the limits of the ancient Persian Empire, the bulwark against that in the end is going to be Israel and our Arab allies. They're going to be the frontline states here. Putting that carrier in, as you see the Iranians kind of ramping up, does make military sense. I think there is an ironic element to it in that this is the Lincoln Carrier Battle Group. Our American president, who was the most resolute in war, the most compassionate in peace. Interesting that would be, not to go all John Meacham on you here, but that would be an interesting angle to this. But I think I think there is a right trigger statement ahead. I think there is a component here of domestic, but I think overall this one does pretty firmly fall into smart move internationally. The right elements are there to support it.
Admiral James Stavridis, thank you. Coming up on Morning Joe, from looming recession to booming economy, there's been a bit of whiplash when it comes to the conversation about America's financial forecast. We'll take the pulse of the economy and what it means in the next presidential race, next on Morning Joe.
It's intense moments, to say the least, towards what's going on right now
over in the Middle East. So you don't have to worry about me changing in that manner, but I also think that capitalism does involve regulation. It involves taking care of people who are left behind, particularly when the country gets enormously prosperous. I don't think the country will go into socialism in 2020 or in 2040 or 2060.
That's Warren Buffett speaking there at his company's annual Berkshire Hathaway shareholders meeting over the weekend. And joining us now is editor-in-chief for Yahoo Finance, Andy Serwer, who was in Omaha covering the meeting. Also with us, CNBC editor-at-large John Harwood and CNBC's Sarah Eisen live at the New York Stock Exchange. Good morning, everybody. Andy, let me start with you. You were there in the room with Warren Buffett. Obviously, that's a friendly room for Warren Buffett, but what was the message he wanted to send? Because when he speaks, he's not just talking to the room, he's talking to the world.
Well, you know,
This is another reason why it becomes so complex. It's because they can't stay on one particular issue other than maybe a minute and a half to 2 minutes, and then they're off to some other frenzy that they're talking about, which makes it extremely difficult for one person to be able to identify the dangers that we're reeking off into pertaining to our national security. To think that I have tried to pre-warn everybody on either my Facebook platform or my YouTube platform about the Persian Empire rising up that it talks about in the book of Revelations as well as the book of Daniel, and to think that these occurrences once more was ignored is similar towards me predicting that there was going to be an uprising on the southern border towards a influx of more immigrants trying to seek asylum over here in America. It's pretty obvious the problems going on in Venezuela and other parts of South America is just going to add that much more insult to misery. In addition to having a government in the Mexican region that really and truly does not care about the United States government. They still have old grudges of what occurred back in the early 1800s whenever whatever the guy's name was, Azalias Mishavayas, basically turned against their own people and surrendered towards allowing for us to confiscate the property that we confiscated during that time. Once more, the individual that's talking to you right now in the year 2006 had predicted a bloody road ahead in regard to all this insanity and all this, you know what, that's going on, not only in our schools, but also on our streets, pertaining to failed policies with our politicians. And I could go on and on and on towards us being $21+ trillion in debt and all the other problems that we're facing. The planet Earth has turned into nothing more than a tinderbox of events that could escalate within the next 24 to 48 hours to the point that not only their world over there would be rapidly changed, but our world over here could and would be rapidly changed. We are living in a society right now to where everything is instant. And the reason why is because of various things that's been created by man in regard to satellite, TV, networking, internet, social platform medias. We're living in an environment on this planet to where now everything is instant. It's instant. The occurrences that used to happen across the pond that at one time took weeks, if not months, for us to hear about, now can occur and us find out in seconds, if not no more than a few minutes. A few minutes, we can find out what has occurred majorly over in the other part of the world. Almost seconds. It's almost that close of a margin. And the same thing with the knowledge over there towards what goes on over here. We're living in that type of world today to where we didn't exist in that type of world 25, 30, 40, 50 years ago. But now we are. So everything that gets spoken, how it gets spoken, and the frame of thought that it gets spoken in, all matters. It all matters because we are no longer living in the era of pencil and paper, but now we're living in the computerized world, the computer world, which is that much more intense whenever you're talking about.
Calm this thing down for us, would you please?
Whenever
because,
you're talking
I
about
think more
trying
than a few
to
people are looking at
trying to calm people's nerves down, that's on the other side of the pond. But yet, no, you're also dealing with biblical Bible prophecy. Prophecy that has been predicted in the Bible is going to occur. I don't care how many people reject it. I don't care how many people dislike it. I don't care how many people try to fight up against it. It's still going to occur. And that's the very thing that I have been running into for the past 30 plus years since I've been out into the eyes of the people, is that I've had a clan of people, a group of people, that for some reason thought that they could undermine God and that they could undermine God's will and God's people in that will. This major conspiracy that did in fact begin in my life in 1983 proves that not only I have been targeted illegitimately in all of this, but other remaining factors pertaining to the Christian society, not just here in America, but throughout the planet, has also been targeted too as well, including our brothers and sisters in Christ over in Jerusalem, where Jesus Christ originally come from. I pray that this will be an awakening moment more so than a devastationable moment, because whenever it comes to Jerusalem and the Americans, we are outvoted, we are outmanned, we are outsourced in various ways to the point that I can't even make mention of on this particular broadcast, because it would become a national interest deluge if I did so. And out of the interest of not only the American government, but the American Christian government, I have chosen to remain silent in those areas. This all falls back to previous administrations that did not set up its chess game, its players properly. And because things was either ignored or not taken care of promptly in not only the political sector, but the Christian sector, now it has put us in between a hard place and a rock. Especially whenever it comes to being defenseless in some of these wide world reeking areas. May God have mercy on the Christian society up onto this planet, regardless whether they be on this side of the continent or the other. Because the things that is evolving and escalating could be one of the most triumphing moments that the believers has ever faced up onto this planet. And what I just said was a mouthful. I'm going to redo this because of the significance of what this man was talking about to my viewers, and hopefully you will get it on the second time more so than you did the first time. Please, let's listen.
Indeed, it certainly can get into your head, but let's look at the geopolitics of this for a second. If you see Iran, which it is, pushing throughout the limits of the ancient Persian Empire, the bulwark against that in the end is going to be Israel and our Arab allies. They're going to be the frontline states here. Putting that carrier in, as you see the Iranians kind of ramping up, does make military sense. I think there is an ironic element to it in that this is the Lincoln Carrier Battle Group. Our American president, who was the most resolute in war, the most compassionate in peace. Interesting that would be, not to go all John Meacham on you here, but that would be an interesting angle to this. But
Thanks for the warning.
I think there is a right trigger statement ahead. I think there is a component here of domestic, but I think overall this one does pretty firmly fall into smart move internationally. The right elements are there to support it.
Admiral James Stavridis, thank you. Coming up on Morning Joe, from looming recession.
There we go. Thanks again to my viewers, and hopefully the hand of God will be upon each and every move that our CIA as well as our Pentagon makes in days to come in the defense of the American people's interest. Shalom.